The setting of Attack on Titan works extremely naturally as a foundation for all sorts of emotional character writing fixated on heart and hopes and dreams and clawing one's way up to a freer world. We have those so broken by the state of the world that it leads them to unbelievable decisions, those who struggle with responsibility and sins thrust upon them who learn to become leaders regardless, those who grit their teeth and accept the mantle from start to finish, those who bear the pain of multiple generations, those who perpetuate this cycle, unknowingly or otherwise, and much more. But in and amidst this swirling tempest of motivations and emotions, we do have one character who I consider to be unique. One who decided that if this world wasn't going to allow her the happiness she deserved, she would forsake everything, live for herself, and grab that fulfillment with her own two hands in a way unique from any other character. And it just so happened that she found a kindred spirit to sweep up in her storm, who becomes a big part of her reason to live while not shifting her resolve. Ymir was formerly no one, a homeless young girl based in Marley, until she was granted this identity by an Eldian cult of sorts that revered Ymir Fritz and worshipped this Ymir as her descendant. Ymir knew she was not royalty, but fulfilled this purpose anyway in order to make those around her happy, to live for others. In time, this illegal cult was found, and Ymir was blamed and stated to be a liar by the man who took her in. In response, Ymir said nothing to dispel this deception, and accepted the consequences of her selflessness. She was abused and derided throughout Marley before being turned into a pure titan by authorities, after which she spent roughly 60 years simply roaming Paradis Island in this miserable existence. Eventually, she unintentionally ate Marcel, who protected Reiner, only to awaken in this otherworldly realm to see the vast expanse of mystical sky spread ahead of her.
再び目を覚ますと、そこには自由が広がっていた。仮に運命ってやつがあるなら、その気まぐれさに笑うしかなかった。でもその時、私は誓ったんだ。もう嘘をつくのは終わりだ。もう二度と自分には嘘をつかない。自分に正直に生きようって。
She was mesmerized, and it was here that she understood the true freedom of choice and agency, that the world may be cruel, but she need not bend to its will for others, that it was okay to live for her own happiness. This instilled a resolve and pride in Ymir, which became essential to her characterization. She became a shifter, traveling inside the walls of Paradis and getting by through whatever means she could, before learning of the illegitimate Krista lens, seeing parallels between herself and Historia's false persona, and using these to fuel her yearning to enlist in the Scouts. From there, she grew connections with quite a few, but by far the most meaningful of those was the one she made with Historia. How deeply she knew her, how much she wanted her to learn to live for herself, and in the end, how much she loved her, how much she valued how she made her feel, and how Historia's presence and belief helped Ymir to see this world as so much more beautiful than she's ever known. Ymir was a perceptive girl who fabricated and grew into a veneer of cynicism to hide her kindness. She ultimately learned that not only was the world never going to do her any favors, but that it was going to actively prevent her from having any semblance of a genuine life at every turn. And so eventually she realized that if being selfless, giving, and altruistic would only ever lead her down the same path of agony, she would forego all of that. Self-interest does tend to have a negative connotation in the modern world, but in my eyes there is absolutely nothing wrong with it as long as it doesn't delve into unhealthy extremes. At the end of the day, the one guarantee in life is that you are always going to be there for you, start to finish, thick and thin. So there is nothing wrong with valuing yourself, fulfilling yourself, and putting yourself first. And in a world as cutthroat, oppressive, and cynical as Attack on Titan, you can totally understand why this mentality would be heightened in someone who is just sick and tired of being ostracized. However, despite the tone I'm approaching this idea with, Ymir's brand of self-interest more often than not ended up having a heartfelt basis, because that's who she is, and that is what she desired. For someone that values this intimate touch, living for herself didn't mean living for others, but it did mean living with others, despite what her brash personality would have you think. and the lasting impact she had on those around her, and one person in particular, would reflect this heartfelt soul. In seeing someone in Historia, or at that time, Krista, who reflected the sad and unfulfilling way Ymir had lived her life, she took an immediate interest which soon blossomed into attraction and genuine feelings. And as she continues to see the sad way in which Historia lives a lie, she speaks from experience in calling her out on it and telling her that it is simply unsustainable.
約束だ。私がその秘密を明かしたとき、お前は元の名前を名乗って生きろ。
Through thick and thin, existential issues, war, revelations about both Historia and Ymir's identity, and more, the two are able to find an abstract home in one another, and it's solidified when Historia tells Ymir in no uncertain terms that she will always be there for her. It's a give and take. Ymir saw herself in Historia, helped her, grew to love her, and ultimately wanted better for her, affirming her self-worth, confidence, and identity in the process. And in turn, Ymir was able to gain value and affirmation from Historia, telling her she'll never leave her side and that she believes in her.
頼むよ、ヒストリア。私を助けてくれ！言ったでしょ、ユミル。何があっても、私はあなたの味方だって。
For this lonely young woman that was never able to make connections and whose trust was consistently burned, this is everything. And so she decides to live in large part for Historia as a part of her own will, but also to take the advice from Historia that she imparted to her in the first place and make her own decisions here. Live for herself, do what she believes is right and fulfilling. Even if the world hates the two of them, even if living for themselves involves tearing it all down around them, Historia and Ymir both want the other to be happy and to live freely. However, that in itself ultimately meant that Ymir's path had to diverge from Historia. We've established that Ymir is kind at heart, and this peeks through when we see the guilt she feels about eating Marcel even though it wasn't her fault. Additionally, as mentioned, she's also proud of who she is and uses that as a weapon for allegorical revenge against those who tried to take her life from her and stop her from being herself. And in turn, her revenge is to be herself and be proud of it, to live wholly for herself, to fight back at those that tried to take her agency from her. So considering her guilt and this pride, there was only one outcome once she ensured that Historia was safe, to help Reiner and Bertolt as compensation for what she did to Marcel, with that confrontation also having led to her new lease on life. And this does a wonderful job through twisted contrast in illustrating a key difference between two young girls who bore all the world's evil. One of them was left with nothing, while the other got lucky after her unluckiness and found others to connect with. Ymir often criticized others for not being genuine due to having learned about this topic better than anyone. When she would see those around her bending over backwards to appease others or to look good in a self-detrimental fashion, she wasn't able to stand it because she knew the pain it could lead to and she felt so antithetical to it. And she made a huge step when she saw that horizon and was reborn through realizing. But she had one final hurdle to clear before the end, and that involved making this difficult choice for the sake of what was needed, at the expense of a greater happiness. In leaving Historia for Reiner and Bertolt, she lived for herself here. Was it irrational, illogical, and stupid? Maybe. But she lived in service of the ideal she touted, and she lived how she desired in the end. It was her choice, and hers alone, and that is all she ever wanted for herself, and all Historia ever wanted for her. And she had no regrets, except maybe one.
あの時はすまない。まさか私がお前よりこいつらを選んでしまうなんて。私はこれから死ぬ。でも後悔はしてない。そう言いたいところだが、 正直心残りがある。まだお前と結婚できてないことだ。ユミルより。
Selflessness without reason, logic, or sentimental value is just foolhardy. And in a world like this, you need to find a way to live for yourself and what you believe in. You need to contribute to a world that will lead to your own happiness, but most of all, you need to live the way you want to live. Stand up for what you want to stand up for and embrace who you are, just as Historia and Ymir should have done from the start and learned to do. Even in a hellish world, that can be salvation, and it is never too late to do this. While not contradictory, it is somewhat ironic that Ymir's final act is to sacrifice herself and give up her life with others whilst giving up on a potential future with Historia. But that was her will. It was her choice, the debt she felt she had to pay. And even if no one could see the logic behind it, she was fully confident and comfortable in making this decision and giving her life for those who were involved in her getting that life in the first place, in a sense. And as such, Ymir died as she resolved to live when she embraced the cosmos that starry night. Freely, proudly, saving the one she loved, and above all else, making her own choices. And that is something to be extremely proud of in a story like this. Many thanks for watching.
Krista, 私まだ自分なんて生まれてこなければよかったと思ってた。ただ存在するだけで世界に憎まれたんだ。私は大勢の人の幸せのために死んであげた。でもその時に心から願ったことがある。もし生まれ変わることができたなら、今度は自分のために生きたいと。